My son announced, "We're taking over the cabin." The county clerk stamped my life estate papers at 10:06 a.m. I'd raised a man I didn't recognize anymore. The moment Trent walked through the cabin door, I knew something was wrong. Not in the way you know when someone's sick or hurt. This was different. This was the knowledge that comes from decades of reading people, from building houses and knowing when the foundation was cracked before anyone else could see the damage. Sabrina came in behind him, all smiles and wine bottles, wearing clothes that cost more than my truck payment. They'd announced they were visiting for the weekend, but something in their voices on the phone told me it wasn't really a weekend visit. It was a mission. We sat on the porch of the cabin I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago, when my wife Margaret was still alive, when we'd spend summers here and dream about growing old in this place. The lake stretched out before us, still and perfect in the afternoon light. Trent cleared his throat. This was the moment. "Dad," he said, and his voice had that tone I'd heard before, the tone people use when they're about to tell you something they've already decided is right, regardless of what you think. "We've been talking to a realtor. We've actually already found a buyer. We're taking over the cabin. It's time." Sabrina nodded, her smile never faltering. "You've been here alone too long, Harold. It's not healthy. Plus, the market is incredible right now. We could really get a fresh start." I felt something inside me go still. Not angry. Not even shocked, really. Just still. I set down my coffee cup, and my hand didn't tremble. It was steady. Because at 10:06 a.m. that morning, before they arrived, the county clerk had stamped a set of papers that would make their entire plan impossible. I simply replied, "Is that so?" and poured myself more coffee. Let me go back a few weeks. Trent and Sabrina had shown up that previous weekend with the same smiles, the same wine bottles, talking about how they wanted to modernize the place and help Dad out. Margaret had died 3 years ago, and I'd been spending more time at the cabin than at the house in the city. The cabin was where we'd built our life together, where every corner held a memory of her. The walls I'd built, the furniture I'd crafted, the dock I'd reinforced, all of it was Margaret and me. So when they arrived that day, talking about updates and making it marketable, something inside me shifted. I welcomed them anyway. I made their favorite meals. I gave them the best rooms. But I was watching. That's when I noticed Sabrina sneaking around with her phone, taking photos of the property from multiple angles, the waterfront, the cabin's position, the surrounding land. She was doing it when she thought I wasn't looking, but I built houses for 47 years. You learn to see everything. She was cataloging the property like an appraiser would. She was calculating its worth. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. Over the next few visits, the pressure became more obvious. Sabrina would casually mention property taxes. "It's a lot to handle at your age, Dad," she'd say, using that artificial concerned voice that made my skin crawl. Trent would nod along and say things like, "You should let us handle the cabin," and "We can take this burden off your shoulders." They made it sound like they were helping me, like they were the compassionate ones for wanting to manage my life. But I'm 67 years old. I'm a veteran. I built a career with my hands and my mind. I'm not incompetent. I'm not helpless. I can handle my own property. One evening, as I was pretending to be absorbed in a book, I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. "How much are lakefront properties going for this season?" Sabrina asked. "I saw similar places listed at $800,000, Trent replied. $800,000. That's what they were talking about. Not their father's memories. Not the home he'd built with his late wife. Just money. Just a number that could change their lives if they could get their hands on it. The real shock came about 2 weeks later. I went to my desk to look at some insurance papers I needed to update, and I noticed immediately that my manila folder was gone. The one with my deed, my original property documents, my insurance information. I found Trent in the kitchen. "Hey, where's the folder that was in my desk?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He looked genuinely offended. "Dad, we were just cleaning up while you were outside. Trying to help. That folder should be here somewhere." But I knew exactly where it was. I could see it. Later that day, Sabrina's laptop bag was sitting open on the dining room table, and the edge of a very familiar manila envelope was visible inside. My folder. They had taken it. They were looking at my documents without my permission, trying to understand the deed, probably wondering if they could forge my signature or create some false claim to the property. I didn't confront them. Instead, I made a decision. It was time to fight back. I called Elaine Dawson the next morning. She was the attorney who'd handled Margaret's estate, and I trusted her completely. We met at her office downtown, and I laid out the situation. She listened without interrupting, her pen moving across her notepad as I explained about Trent and Sabrina, about the stolen folder, about their plans to sell the cabin and put me in assisted living. When I finished, Elaine sat back and looked at me seriously. "Harold," she said, "if Trent tries to claim the property or get some kind of joint ownership, this could become very ugly very quickly. The good news is, there are ways to make sure you're never forced out of your home, no matter what he tries." She paused and then wrote something on her notepad. I couldn't see it clearly from where I sat, but she turned it toward me. The words read, "Life Estate Deed." "What's that?" I asked. She smiled faintly, like she'd been waiting for this question. "It's a legal document that gives you irrevocable rights to live in and control the property for the rest of your life. Even if he somehow got the deed, he couldn't evict you. You'd own the right to be there until you die. It's ironclad." The trap continued to tighten over the next 2 weeks. Trent started forwarding me brochures for assisted living facilities, places with names like Sunset Gardens and Golden Years Haven. He'd email them with messages like, "Just sending this for reference," or "No pressure, but these places look nice." He told neighbors that I was ready to downsize, spreading the word in our small community that the old man was planning to move on. Sabrina called a contractor and tried to schedule a foundation inspection without asking my permission first. When I found out, I canceled it immediately. That's when I knew this wasn't about helping me anymore, if it ever had been. This was about taking what was mine. That's also when something fundamental changed inside me. I wasn't going to react with anger or desperation. I was going to act with patience and strategy. I was going to beat them at their own game. 3 weeks before they made their announcement, something happened that solidified my resolve. I found the framed photo of Margaret shattered on the floor of the living room. It was a photo from our wedding, taken 45 years ago, both of us young and laughing. Trent said it had just fallen, but the way Sabrina looked when I picked up the broken glass, she knew something about it. Maybe she'd knocked it over deliberately. Maybe they'd both done it as some kind of psychological game. I don't know. But holding those pieces of my wife's face, I felt something inside me shift. A line had been crossed. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about disrespecting the memory of the woman I'd loved, the life we'd built together. I went to my safe that night and removed the original deed. I looked at it for a long time, thinking about Margaret, about the promises I'd made to protect what we'd built. Then I called Elaine and told her we needed to move forward with the life estate deed immediately. The moment everything changes is coming. Hit subscribe now. I started playing a different game. I played the confused old man. I acted compliant and a little bit befuddled. When Trent asked me to add him as a secondary contact on my bank account, just in case, I pretended to be flustered about the forms. I signed nothing, but I acted like I was considering it, like maybe he was right, like perhaps I did need help managing things. Sabrina saw what she wanted to see, an aging father who was starting to lose control, who could be manipulated into compliance. That night, I visited Elaine again. This time, I came prepared with questions and a determination I hadn't felt in years. We talked strategy for hours. She walked me through exactly what would happen with a life estate deed, what protections it would give me, what it would prevent Trent from doing. By the end of the conversation, I knew exactly how I was going to protect my legacy. Elaine laid out the legal strategy in detail. A life estate deed was a special document that would grant me full rights to live on and control the cabin until my death. More importantly, it meant that even if Trent somehow got the deed to the property, through fraud, through forging documents, through any legal means he could fabricate, he still couldn't evict me. He would own a remainder interest, meaning he'd get the property only after I died. But my right to live there and control what happened on the land? That was mine, irrevocably, for life. It was the perfect solution. Sabrina and Trent could forge documents, could claim ownership, could take legal action, and none of it would matter. I would always have the right to be in my home. Let's do it, I whispered to Elaine. She nodded and began preparing the paperwork. The following Tuesday morning, I sat in Elaine's office and signed the life estate deed. My hands were steady. I wasn't nervous or uncertain. I was resolute. This was the right thing to do. Elaine took the documents immediately to the county clerk's office downtown. She filed them that morning at 10:06 a.m. I have the timestamp memorized. 10:06 a.m. That's when my freedom was officially recorded in the public record. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email from Trent. "We'll be there Friday." Big news. He didn't know that his big news had already been preempted by something much bigger. He didn't know that my big news, the filing I'd completed that morning, had just rendered his entire plan impossible. I printed out the confirmation from the county clerk and held it in my hands, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt since Margaret died. Trent and Sabrina arrived on Friday evening, and they were practically vibrating with excitement. Champagne bottles clinked as they set them on the kitchen counter. They were acting like they'd already won, like the cabin was already sold and the money was already in their accounts. We sat around the dinner table, and Trent launched into his speech. "We've spoken with a realtor," he announced, his voice dripping with false confidence. "We actually already have a buyer lined up. The market is perfect right now. We could close in 60 days. Sabrina leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "You'll love your new apartment, Harold. We've been looking at some really nice assisted living facilities. You'll have people around you, activities, meals prepared. You won't have to worry about anything anymore." They were talking about my life like it was their decision to make. They were describing my future like it had already been decided. And they had no idea that their entire plan had already been destroyed. I simply smiled and said, "Let's talk tomorrow morning. I think we have some things to discuss." That night, Elaine called me. The county clerk had confirmed the filing. The life estate deed was official and recorded in the public record. It was real. It was permanent. I could feel my heartbeat slowing down, my breathing becoming normal. I placed the certified copy of the life estate deed into my desk drawer, underneath the family Bible and next to Margaret's wedding ring and her favorite reading glasses. These were the things that mattered to me. And now, officially and legally, my right to protect them was eternal. Over breakfast, Trent tried again. "We really need to make a decision here, Dad. We've got a buyer waiting. They're offering asking price, which is incredible. We could have the money in 90 days. Sabrina added, "The realtor said if we don't move quickly, they might look at other properties." They were creating artificial urgency, trying to pressure me into agreeing. It was manipulation by design. I finished my coffee slowly, deliberately. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single piece of paper. I set it down on the table in front of Trent and slid it across toward him. "You might want to read the timestamp at the top," I said quietly. Trent picked up the paper, squinting at it. I watched his face change. I watched the confusion appear first, then the understanding, then something that looked like anger and disbelief mixing together. County Clerk's Office, filed 10:06 a.m., he read aloud. That's when Elaine stepped through the front door. She'd been waiting outside, as planned. Mr. Whitmore, she said, addressing Trent formally, as your father's attorney, I suggest you stop trespassing on your father's property. Sabrina's smug expression evaporated like water on hot pavement. She looked at Trent, and I could see her doing the calculations in her head. She was trying to figure out if there was a way around this, a loophole, something she could exploit. There wasn't. The life estate deed was airtight. It was filed. It was permanent. I owned the right to this cabin for the rest of my life, period. We're at the turning point. Subscribe to see what happens next. You tricked us. Trent shouted, his face flushing red. You knew what we were trying to do, and you tricked us. Elaine remained calm. No. Your father protected what's his. There's nothing tricky about a man defending his home and his legacy from his own family. Trent stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly across the floor. You'll regret this, Dad, he said, his voice cold. You think you've won, but you haven't. This isn't over. He grabbed Sabrina's arm, and they stormed out. I watched their car disappear down the driveway, and I felt Elaine place a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said quietly. I nodded, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. I felt like I'd lost something that I'd never get back. The father-son relationship I'd always hoped for had just died in that kitchen. The retaliation started a week later. First, my power got disconnected, by mistake, the utility company said. Then the tax office sent me an audit notice. Strange charges appeared on my credit card that I didn't authorize. Trent was throwing everything at me, trying to make my life difficult, trying to punish me for protecting myself. But Elaine assured me she had everything under control. Let him hang himself with his own greed, she told me. Every illegal thing he does just makes our case stronger. I stayed calm and documented everything. I kept records of the disconnection, the audit notice, the fraudulent charges. I was building a case against him without even trying. He was doing it to himself. Then a real estate listing appeared online. The cabin. My cabin. The one Trent had no legal right to sell. The photos showed the interior I'd built, the dock Margaret and I had renovated, the fireplace where we'd spent countless winters. It was listed by Sabrina's real estate firm for $850,000. I called the agent and told her to take it down immediately. She claimed she couldn't, Trent had authorized the listing. I contacted Elaine, and she filed a cease and desist order the next morning. The listing was a direct violation of my life estate rights. It was also proof that Trent was actively trying to sell property he didn't have the right to sell. That was criminal. Elaine pushed the investigation further. Trent's unauthorized listing violated multiple property laws. Sabrina's real estate firm received legal warnings and cease and desist orders. The quick money grab that had seemed so perfect when they arrived that Friday suddenly became a criminal liability. Within 2 weeks, Sabrina had been fired from her firm. The brokerage couldn't risk association with fraud. Trent was suddenly alone, without his wife's professional support, without his plan, without the money he'd been counting on. I found out later that Trent had borrowed heavily against the expected cabin sale. He'd promised his creditors the money would come through. Banks and investors were calling him constantly. He came back to the cabin one afternoon, looking broken and desperate. "Dad," he said, and I barely recognized his voice, "I need your help. I'm in real trouble. I borrowed money thinking the sale would go through. Can you please help me fix this?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw what greed had done to him. It had consumed him. It had destroyed him. You fixed your own mess, I told him quietly, and I closed the door. Word spreads fast in a small town. Within days, everyone knew that Trent had tried to evict his own father and sell the family cabin behind his back. People who'd known him his whole life started treating him differently. Clients stopped calling. Neighbors who used to wave now just looked away. Sabrina left him 3 weeks after she was fired. She'd married him for money, and he'd proven he didn't have any. I didn't spread the story. I didn't need to. The truth was enough. And Harold Whitmore, the quiet old man in the cabin, became something of a local hero. The man who'd refused to be pushed around by his own family. The man who'd protected his legacy. One night, about 4 months after the life estate deed was filed, Trent showed up at my porch drunk. He was shouting, his voice ragged and desperate. "You ruined me," he screamed at the cabin. "You took everything from me. You think you're so smart, Dad? You think you've won? Well, I'm ruined. I'm completely ruined." Neighbors heard him. Within minutes, police lights were flashing down my driveway. Officers approached him carefully, speaking in low, calm voices. Trent was arrested for trespassing and disturbing the peace. I watched from the window as they escorted him away, as the red and blue lights faded into the darkness. That's when I knew it was really over. Elaine helped me file a restraining order. Trent was legally barred from the cabin and the property surrounding it. He couldn't come within 500 feet of my home. It was official now, my son was no longer welcome in the place his parents had built together. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. No anxiety about what he might do next. No fear that he'd somehow found a legal loophole. I was safe. The cabin was safe. Margaret's memory was safe. I found a letter that evening, tucked inside Margaret's Bible. I'd never seen it before. It was in her handwriting, dated years ago, before she got sick. It read, "Protect what we built, Hal. Protect it like you protect me. No matter what happens, no matter who tries to take it, protect our cabin." Months passed. Trent's house was foreclosed on. The bank auctioned off his possessions. I could have ignored the whole thing, let him lose everything without lifting a finger. But I'm not like him. I'm not driven by the need to punish. So I quietly bought back a few of his woodworking tools, sentimental ones that had belonged to my grandfather. They weren't valuable, but they held memory. I placed them beside the cabin fireplace, where they belonged. It was closure, in a way. Not for him. For me. One evening, I sat on the cabin porch, watching the sun set over the lake. The water was still and golden, just like it had been when Margaret and I first bought this land. I whispered to her memory, "They tried to take it all, Maggie. But they never understood what this place really means. It's not money. It's not a real estate transaction. It's us. It's our life. And no one can take that away." A truck pulled up the driveway. I recognized it immediately, it was Trent. My heart tightened. But as he stepped out, I could see he was different. Humbled. Broken in a way that actual wisdom sometimes requires. He walked slowly up to the porch. "I was wrong, Dad," he said simply. "I was so wrong. I wanted what you had. I thought if I could have the cabin, I could have what you and Mom had." I looked at my son for a long moment. I could have said nothing. I could have told him to leave and never come back. Instead, I stood up and walked into the cabin. I returned with a hammer, one of those old tools he'd lost in the foreclosure, one that my grandfather had used to build his first house. I placed it in his hands. "Build your own," I told him. For the first time, I saw something like understanding in his eyes. He nodded slowly and turned to leave. As his truck disappeared down the driveway, I smiled. Not out of bitterness or triumph, but out of peace. The deed was framed on my cabin wall now, the timestamp clearly visible, 10:06 a.m. That moment. That filing, that stamp on the paper, had given me back my freedom. It had protected not just my home, but my dignity, my legacy, and my wife's memory. As I settled back into my chair on the porch, watching the stars come out over the lake, I whispered one more time, "They came to take my home, Maggie." Instead, they handed me my freedom.